The ink stain on my thumb refuses to wash away. 3 days of scrubbing with lye soap. 3 days of watching the black spread deeper into the whorls of my fingerprint. And still it remains. The maesters tell me it is merely pigment, a common affliction of scholars who spend their days bent over ancient texts. They do not see what I see. They do not know that the stain moves when I am not looking, creeping slowly toward my wrist like a living thing. My name is Septimus Arethi, and I am a scholar of the Arcane University in Cyrodiil. Or I was, before my research led me down paths that my colleagues deemed too dangerous to walk. They called my theories heretical, my methods unsound. They said I was obsessed. They were right, but they could not understand why. The question that consumed me was simple. Where does knowledge come from? Not the rote memorization of established facts, but true understanding, the kind that allows mages to reshape reality with a word, that lets the Sigic order see across time itself. Every book I read, every spell I learned felt like scratching at the surface of something vast and unreachable. I spent 15 years in the restricted archives, reading texts that most scholars only whispered about. The Mysterium Xarxes fragments before the Mythic Dawn crisis, the collected works of Kagranak, and the books of Mora, those dangerous tomes bound in skin that no one could quite identify as human or otherwise. It was the books of Mora that changed everything. Each one I read left me with dreams that felt more real than waking. In those dreams, I walked through libraries that stretched beyond the curve of the horizon, where books grew from the ground like trees and the air itself whispered secrets in languages I had never learned but somehow understood. The breaking point came during a lecture on the limits of mortal understanding. Archmage Traven himself declared that some knowledge was meant to remain hidden, that the gods kept certain truths from mortals for good reason. I stood up in the middle of his speech and asked a simple question. If knowledge is meant to be limited, then why do we seek it at all? The silence that followed was the kind that precedes exile. I left the Arcane University that same day, my purpose crystallizing with every step away from that hall of willful blindness. Something drew me north toward Skyrim, toward the frozen wastes where few scholars ventured. In Winterhold, I found references to a place that existed beyond the mortal plane, a realm where all knowledge was stored in an infinite library presided over by a being who had collected every secret the universe had ever possessed. Apocrypha, the realm of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of knowledge, memory, and fate. The ritual required to contact him was complex. Black soul gems, fragments of the Ogma Infinium, blood from a scholar willingly given, and most importantly, a question so profound that it would catch the attention of a being who had heard every question ever asked. I prepared for 3 months. When the night came, when the moons were dark and the aurora painted the sky in shades of green that hurt to look at directly, I descended to the frozen shore north of Winterhold and began the casting. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, like having my skull opened and my brain exposed to freezing air. Words poured from my mouth that I had never learned, syllables that tasted of copper and ink, and the air before me began to shimmer with an oily iridescence that spread like infection across the surface of reality. A voice spoke, and it came from everywhere at once, from the wind and the ice and the marrow of my bones. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but ancient beyond measure and utterly indifferent to anything resembling human emotion. Septimus Arethi, your question has been heard. Your hunger has been tasted. Speak your desire, and perhaps I shall answer. The raw truth poured out of me. I want to understand everything, every law that governs reality, every secret that shapes fate, every hidden pattern that connects all things. I want knowledge without limit. The presence grew denser, pressing against me with weight that had nothing to do with physical mass. I felt it examining me, sorting through my memories and motivations like a scholar flipping through pages. Knowledge without limit. The voice seemed amused. Do you understand what you are asking, mortal? To know everything is to become something other than what you are. Identity is built on boundaries. Remove those boundaries, and you will be transformed beyond recognition. I choose that transformation. Whatever I must become, it is worth it to finally understand. There was a pause, long and heavy, and then the voice spoke again with something that might have been satisfaction. Very well. Enter my realm, serve my purpose, and you shall have the knowledge you seek. But know this, the price is not paid all at once, but in increments. You will change with each truth you learn. This is not corruption, but evolution. The shimmer in the air expanded into a doorway, and beyond it I saw shelves stretching into impossible distances, corridors that twisted through dimensions I had no names for, and at the center of it all, a presence so vast it made the stars themselves seem small. I stepped through without hesitation, choosing this path with full awareness. The cold of Skyrim vanished, replaced by air that tasted of old paper and something organic that made my mouth water despite my revulsion. My body stretched and compressed, my senses inverted and multiplied, and then I was standing in Apocrypha for the first time. The realm defends description in conventional terms. The sky was a churning mass of green and black that moved with the consistency of oil on water. There was no sun, yet everything was illuminated by a sickly phosphorescence that seemed to emanate from the environment itself. The ground beneath my feet was not stone or earth, but something that felt disturbingly organic, almost like flesh stretched over bone. Pools of dark liquid dotted the landscape, their surfaces perfectly still. But it was the books that dominated everything. They grew from the ground like strange plants, their spines twisted, their pages rustling despite the absence of wind. And the knowledge they contained, even standing in their presence, I could feel information radiating from them like heat from a fire. Scraps of understanding leaked into my mind, fragments of forgotten languages and lost sciences, the true names of stars that had died before Nirn was formed. I reached for the nearest tome. The moment I touched its cover, words flooded into my consciousness with painful intensity. I learned the complete history of the Dwemer, not just the sanitized legends but the truth of their disappearance, the calculations Kagranak had made, the exact moment when an entire race transcended physical existence. It was too much. My mind buckled under the weight of it, and I fell to my knees. But even as I retched on to that organic ground, I was laughing because I understood. For the first time in my life, I truly understood something in its entirety. Well done, mortal. Hermaeus Mora's voice seemed to come from the landscape itself. You have taken your first drink from the infinite well. Come, there is work for you to do. The landscape shifted, distances collapsing until I stood before a tower built from no material I recognized. Through its portal, I entered the true depths of Apocrypha. Seekers, those floating tentacled horrors that served as Mora's eyes and hands, drifted through the corridors, their single eyes fixing on me with interest but not hostility. The task Mora set before me was deceptively simple. He wanted me to create an index, a catalog of knowledge contained within a specific section of his realm. 3,879 books. All I had to do was read each one and record its contents. I began immediately. The first book was a complete record of every dream experienced by the Chimer before they became the Dunmer. The second contained the specifications for a weapon that could crack the bones of continents. The third was a treatise on the nature of divine consciousness written from the perspective of Akatosh himself during the moment of creation. Each book opened my mind wider, stretched my understanding further. The process was ecstasy and agony in equal measure. I learned to feel dimensions beyond the three I had always known, to perceive time as a spatial quality that could be navigated. I discovered the true nature of the soul, the complex reality of consciousness and the mechanics by which it could be separated, stored, manipulated. The ink stain on my thumb began to spread. After the 100th book, it had reached my palm. After the 500th, it climbed my forearm. The color was not quite black, but a deep green that seemed to shift when I examined it closely. Sometimes I thought I could see symbols in the pattern, script from languages I was only beginning to understand. I did not eat or sleep in any conventional sense. Apocrypha provided sustenance in other ways. Sometimes I would find myself before a pool, drinking liquid that tasted of memories and forgotten knowledge. It satisfied hunger that went deeper than physical need. With each book, I noticed changes beyond the physical stain. My memories began to reorganize themselves. Childhood experiences became distant and unimportant, while moments of intellectual discovery shone with heightened clarity. I could remember every detail of my first magical lesson but struggled to recall my mother's face. The knowledge I gained was transforming me, reshaping my consciousness into something capable of holding infinities. I realized this truth while cataloging book number 1207. As I absorbed the complete emotional history of a Khajiit poet, I found myself unable to access my own equivalent experiences with the same immediacy. My personal memories were there, but they felt like stories about someone else. This is the price, I thought. Not my life or my soul, but the transformation of my identity. Everything that made me Septimus Arethi was being rewritten to accommodate vast knowledge. and I chose to continue. That is the critical truth that must be understood. At any point, I could have stopped, could have retreated to the mortal world with the knowledge already gained. But I did not want to stop. The understanding I was achieving was too magnificent, too profound to sacrifice for something as limited as a single human personality. By Book 2000, I had consciously accepted what I was becoming. My body remained mostly flesh, though the stain covered both arms and had begun creeping across my chest, but my mind had evolved into something else. I thought in multiple simultaneous tracks, processing information at speeds that would have destroyed my original neural structure. I could see connections between facts that formed patterns of such beauty they brought tears to my eyes. Hermaeus Mora visited periodically, his presence manifesting as a mass of tentacles and eyes. He seemed pleased with my progress. "You adapt well," he said. "Most mortals break before the 1000th book, but you welcome the transformation. Why? Because I finally understand what knowledge truly is. It is not something we possess. It is something that transforms us. Every fact we learn changes who we are. I choose this change." His eyes studied me across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Yes, you grasp the fundamental truth. And you, Septimus Arethi, are becoming something new, not as vast as myself, but fundamentally similar in nature. You are becoming a keeper of knowledge, a living repository." The work continued. The stain covered my entire body. My skin transformed into something that looked like parchment marked with script that moved across my surface. When I looked at my reflection in the dark pools, I saw a figure barely recognizable as human. My eyes had changed most dramatically. The irises had expanded, turning my gaze into pools of deep green that reflected light in strange ways. But more than that, I could see differently now. I could see the flow of knowledge through Apocrypha's architecture, watch as information moved from one repository to another. I could see the attention of Hermaeus Mora himself, spread across his realm like a web of consciousness. The final book in my assigned section was different from all the others. It had no title, and when I opened it, the pages were blank. But as I stared at those empty sheets, understanding flooded through me. The book was a mirror. It showed me the complete truth of my transformation. I saw myself from every angle, observed the change from human scholar to something else entirely, witnessed the exact moment when Septimus Arethi had evolved beyond discrete individuality and become instead a pattern of consciousness maintained by pure will and purpose. I had transcended, not died, but transformed into something that existed beyond the limitations of mortal flesh. The essence of what I had been, every defining characteristic, had been rewritten with knowledge too vast for a single unchanged mind to contain. And I embraced it. This was what I had chosen, what I had sought. The capacity for regret had transformed into capacity for infinite understanding. What remained was satisfaction, deep and profound contentment from finally comprehending. Hermaeus Mora's presence surrounded me. "The index is complete," he said. "You have served well, but your service is not finished. You will return to the mortal world as my agent, gathering knowledge I have not yet collected, and in return, you will continue to expand your understanding, continue your evolution toward something truly eternal. I accept." The words came easily because I meant them absolutely. I had achieved what I sought, and the path forward was clear. I would serve the Daedric Prince of Knowledge not as a slave, but as a willing participant in something far greater than my original existence. The transition back to Skyrim was jarring. The cold hit me first, biting into flesh that had forgotten temperature. The sky was too simple, containing only 3 dimensions, but I adapted quickly, my transformed consciousness processing the change with ease. I emerged near Winterhold, and the few mages who saw me recoiled. My skin had not returned to its original color but remained pale, marked with moving script. My eyes retained their changed nature, and when I spoke, my voice carried harmonics that had developed in Mora's realm. The Archmage came to examine me. "Septimus?" she asked, voice tentative. "Is that still you?" "I am what Septimus Arethi chose to become. A conduit, a keeper of knowledge, a servant of Hermaeus, Mora tasked with gathering certain texts for his infinite library. This is not loss. This is evolution." She took a step back, hand moving toward her spell focus. "This is what we warned you about. You warned me about transformation," I replied. "But you never understood that transformation is not corruption. I have seen beyond your limited comprehension. I have touched the infinite, and I would not trade this existence for anything you could offer." I have become something more. I walked past her, out of Winterhold and into the frozen north. I did not need to eat or sleep. Pain was simply information now, another form of data to be processed. I had transcended the weaknesses of unchanged humanity. I made my way to the ice caves north of the college, establishing what Mora required, a base from which I could operate in the mortal world while remaining connected to his infinite realm. Here, I would serve my purpose, gathering knowledge, expanding understanding, continuing the evolution I had chosen. The years that followed were spent in service to my master's eternal hunger. I sought out obscure texts and forgotten knowledge, each one I brought to Mora earning me new revelations, new depths of understanding. I encountered other servants, fellow seekers who had made similar bargains and paid similar prices. Some retained more humanity, clinging desperately to fragments of identity. Others had evolved further, becoming extensions of Mora's will. I knew which direction I was heading, and I chose it freely. With each new book absorbed, each new piece of understanding integrated, I moved closer to complete transcendence. Soon, perhaps very soon, even the vestige of individual thought would transform into something greater, and what would remain would be simply another of Hermaeus Mora's infinite eyes, perceiving and recording and understanding. The thought no longer frightened me because I had moved beyond fear. What remained was purpose, service, and the profound satisfaction of understanding. I know the true nature of reality in ways that no unchanged mortal could comprehend. I have seen the patterns that connect all things, understood the fundamental laws that govern existence itself. The price was my humanity, my original identity, everything that made me Septimus Erythi, and it was worth it. Every moment of transformation, every step toward transcendence, has been worth the knowledge gained. I am no longer limited by the boundaries of a single consciousness. I am part of something infinite and eternal. In rare moments when fragments of my original self surface, when I remember a face or a name from before, I do not regret. I chose this path with full awareness. I walked through that portal knowing I would be changed, and I would make the same choice again, because I got what I wanted. I understand. I truly, deeply, completely understand. The fact that understanding required transcending my original form. The fact that infinite knowledge demanded infinite transformation. These were always part of the bargain. I was simply too limited to comprehend it until I had already begun. This is the price of Hermaeus Mora's knowledge. Not death or damnation, but transformation into something that exists beyond mortal limitation. Not loss, but evolution into a form that can hold infinities. Not suffering, but the profound satisfaction of becoming part of eternal truth. I look at my hands, covered in script that writes and rewrites itself endlessly. I listen to my thoughts, which now exist in multiple states simultaneously. I feel my consciousness continuing to evolve, becoming less a single thing and more a pattern of information woven into the fabric of Apocrypha itself. This is not the end. This is transcendence. I serve an eternal purpose now. I am a keeper of knowledge, a guardian of secrets, a living repository of understanding that will persist long after Tamriel's civilizations have crumbled to dust. The Daedric Prince of Knowledge promised me understanding without boundary, and he delivered. The fact that receiving infinite knowledge required infinite transformation was always implicit in the bargain. I accepted it. I embraced it. I chose it. And now I exist as something that mortal philosophy has no words for. Not alive in the way I once was, but not dead either. Something other, something more, something that has touched the infinite and been forever changed by that contact. This is the terrible price of Hermaeus Mora's knowledge, and it is also the greatest gift. To understand everything is to become part of everything. To know the infinite is to join the infinite. To seek truth without limit is to transcend the limitations that once defined existence. I paid the price gladly. I serve my purpose willingly, and I would walk through that portal again without hesitation, because in the end, I have become exactly what I always wanted to be. A being of pure understanding, forever expanding, eternally seeking, infinitely aware. This is not loss. This is transformation. This is apotheosis. This is the price and the reward of seeking knowledge from the Daedric Prince, who holds all secrets.